Welcome to episode number 105 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, iHeartRadio, and all streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and the like. This is Jason Finelli, the esports and gaming insider for Fox PHL The Gambler. Very exciting episode for you tonight. We have an update on the Fusion, which is half good, half bad. Not really sure where to put it, with Midseason Madness happening all this week. We have we're going to talk about San Diego Comic-Con happening this weekend and everything that goes on along with that. And also, starting the program tonight, we have a fantastic interview with two members of one of the highest profile virtual reality game developers out there, talking about their latest game coming to the Meta Quest 2 very, very soon. So, let's not waste any time and get right into the 6 in 60 seconds. Riot Games has announced the dates for League of Legends Worlds 2022, with the play-ins beginning September 29th in Mexico, leading up to the finals on November 5th in San Francisco. The LA Thieves win Call of Duty's Major 4 in New York, with the first match for championships now set. Championships is August 4th to the 7th, and the matchups are Seattle versus London, Boston versus Los Angeles, Toronto versus Optic Texas, and Atlanta versus New York. Valorant Masters Copenhagen is down to its final four, with Paper X taking on Optic in the upper bracket, and Fun Plus Phoenix facing Fnatic in the lower. A Destiny 2 showcase has been announced for August 23rd, alongside Season 18's debut. A Tiny Tina's Wonderlands player has earned an item with a chance of 1 in 85 billion of being found. And finally, a former Grand Theft Auto 5 boss's studio, Build a Rocket Boy, hires an ex-2K and PlayStation veterans for a brand new game called Everywhere. Those are your 6 in 60 seconds. All right, here we go. Our first segment here on Cheesesteaks and Controllers. Moss, for those who are playing virtual reality games, they already know the quality of Moss. One of my favorite PSVR games is the first one. I'm going to admit that I haven't quite played the second one yet in front of the devs. Probably not a good idea, but here I am. But I'm very excited to finally jump in on this. And if you're a Quest owner, you're going to be able to do that very soon with the Quest 2 port, which I believe is out right now as of this episode being released. So with me right now is the co-founder and art director at Polyarc and the senior game designer at Polyarc. That's Chris Alderson and Doug Burton, and we're talking Moss Book 2. Gentlemen, how are we today?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah,
Yes.
Beautiful day in Seattle.
I'm glad to hear that. Doug, you're Seattle also?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Sounders fans, talking about the
Yeah.
before we came on.
Yeah.
I love when you guys come to town, but I hate when you guys come to town because you're
Yeah.
so good.
Feeling is mutual.
It's been a good couple of years with our two teams playing each other. So first, with Moss Book 2, I have dabbled a little bit. I don't want to say I haven't played it at all. So there is a more of a what I've been calling Metroidvania style approach to this game as opposed to the first one. It's not completely Metroidvania, but it allows you to return to previously explored areas and do extra things and find new things. What were some of the additional challenges you faced when you decided to go that route as opposed to the more linear original game?
I mean, yeah, we definitely wanted to kind of make the rooms more complex and make the kind of the back and forth with the player and Quill's weapons a little more complex. Now the weapons work as puzzles and the rooms are just larger, and you have reasons to like come back to old rooms and redo them. So that already just adds tons of complexity there. So you have different save states for rooms. Come back to the rooms in different times during the game, and there are kind of different effects happening. Whereas in book 1, usually once you completed a room, we moved on to the next one and you had very little reason to go back. So that just kind of like added some more work on our end of just making sure that the rooms are kind of going to be back in the stage that you left them, no matter kind of what you did while you were there. And also just that, the story and all the kind of hints let the players know, like, hey, you kind of unlock something new. You can head back to, a certain section and explore it again.
Now,
Yeah, that was.
oh, good.
Oh, sorry. That was some of the things we saw in the reviews in the first game is people wanted a reason to come back.
Sure.
Mhm.
So that's kind of one reason why we did that. And then also connecting you to the world. When the world changes around you and you see something familiar change, we feel like players tend to understand and like feel invested and know something is happening in the world. And so it tends to also kind of ground them in that space.
Sure. Now, from an art perspective, when you're designing areas knowing that players might be coming back, are you trying to like put little hints in the environment, like this is important, you should pay attention to this for later? Or do you try and keep it as muted as possible so they don't expect that this is the path that they'll be taking when they come back?
There's a little bit of both. I think gameplay wise, we'll put some indicators in the world or some like some loot boxes that are impossible to break through. And you'll pass by them and be like, oh wow, I wonder what that is. And then when you discover like the device that you need to like pop open those boxes,
Sure.
It's kind of like it's rewarding, like, oh yeah, I need to like go back there, and you make this mental note. But yeah, also the second thing you touched on, I wouldn't say we try to make it like gray, so like it's not like some one big thing happens and like the area is interesting. I almost like it the other way, where it's like something you loved kind of gets destroyed.
Oh,
Like, then you feel like something, something that is something in the world is happening, and then it kind of like ups the stakes and it makes you and Quill want to succeed even more.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, also a big change from the first game to the second game is leaning more on action, specifically in the uptick in boss battles and the weapons in the puzzles, as you mentioned earlier. So how difficult was it trying to find that balance? Obviously, you wanted to cater more to action fans by putting this stuff in, but you also didn't want to leave your previous games fans the exploration, the world discovery in the dust. So where was finding that middle ground, and how hard was it for the team?
Yeah, I think, one of the big things we definitely wanted to make sure was that people coming to book 2 didn't feel like it was a huge departure and totally different. So we're always asking ourselves, like, does this still feel like Moss? Does Quill still feel like Quill? We don't want her to be becoming too much of like an incredible action hero superstar. Like, she's still like Quill. She's still a little young, naive about everything, and she's still kind of very playful. So we want to make sure that all that stuff came through with like all the new weapons and all the new abilities you got. And so we just make sure we kind of dole it out in like a good pace, make sure it fits very in the world. So it all feels like very much like, oh yeah, this is just a part of what Moss is. And it all ties into the story. So you kind of get to know a little bit more about the reader and like the reader and Quill's connection and kind of how that kind of imbues you both with more power.
Sure.
So as long as it all just kind of fits into the world, then it all kind of naturally finds a good place to like fit in. And we're not too worried about it, feeling out of place, because it all just feels in place the whole time.
Cool. Yeah, Chris, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, if we were to dump all the weapons on you at the very beginning of the game, you'd be like, "Whoa, Quill, where'd you get all this stuff? How'd you get so
personal?
How'd you get so strong? Why are you doing backflips?" But the pacing that we give you, the weapons and the tools in the game, just feels really natural. And I think Doug touched on it. Like at the beginning of the game, we wanted people to feel at home. Like, this is Moss. This is, something familiar. You're at home playing this game, because it had been 4 years. We wanted to remind people what they loved about the first game, and then we start giving you the different tools and weapons and introducing new enemies, and then we start flipping it around a little bit and twisting the story a little bit to like keep it. We wanted to keep it fresh and unpredictable. So it's not just like you're just playing the same story over and over again.
Now, as a quick piggyback to that question, fan feedback so far for the balance that you tried to achieve, has it been mostly positive? Are the previous fans still feeling like this is Moss, or have there been certain things where they're like, maybe you went a little too far here?
I would say I can start. I feel like we struck a really good balance.
Cool.
I've even talked to reviewers who at first they're like, this feels more of the same, kind of what I was saying, but then by the end of it, they're like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted.
Cool.
Yeah, I love hearing the feedback that even like that point of like people being like, oh, is it really changed enough? And then they kind of hit those points where we're ready to give you the new stuff. You're like, oh, okay, no, this is a bunch of new stuff. Okay, I was sorry I ever complained thing or was worried. So yeah, it's nice to hear people's reviews and like kind of how it changes as they're getting through the game. And they're more like, oh, wow, this is new. This is new. Oh, this is different.
That's cool.
And so it's nice to like see that progression.
That's awesome. I can imagine that hearing that feedback, you know, like a swell of pride, right? You're like, oh man, they're finally figuring out what we were doing here.
Exactly. It's like, oh, it worked. We worried about that, but
we did it.
All worked out.
It's exciting. It's also nerve wracking because we put a lot of effort and we put our heart and soul into the game, and it's a labor of love for everyone. And we really. I desperately need people to like it. It's like, else, what are we doing? You know,
that's true.
And so I need that validation.
Well, I always joke that like, you know, you already have book one, like, you know, in your back pocket. You're like, oh, I did that, nailed it. And so I joined the team for book two. And so even from day one, I'm like, okay, all I gotta do is at least be as good as book one. and I feel like I didn't ruin anything. But no, it's nice to hear people be like, they still really enjoyed it just as much as book one. And so
that's
awesome. Great to hear too.
Love to hear that. Now, speaking of book one to book two, this sequel begins right after the first one. Like you're thrown right back into the story after the first game. But from a narrative standpoint, I'm curious if you found that approach more restrictive, like we have to follow these beats, this is a choice we've made, or if having that clear jumping off point kind of made you get right back into the flow in Chris's point of view, at least. Doug, you said you joined in later. Just get right back into the flow where the story was before and just boom, off you go.
Well, something that's kind of fun to bring up is that this Moss Book 1 and Book 2 were initially planned as one game.
Okay,
and,
that makes sense.
Earlier on in VR, you know, like games, you know, the game we wanted to make was probably more expensive than the market was willing to pay us. And, you know, as a new studio, we only had so much time and money to like get something out the door. And so like, okay, let's stop it as you reach the castle. And so we already knew early on that the owl was the main antagonist. The owl is the thing that we were leading up to. The serpent at the end of Moss 1 is basically just the bodyguard. And it was interesting though, because when you have that full story, it's all about the journey, right? Like Quill goes on this journey and goes to all these fantastical places, really utilizing VR and taking you to all these places that, you know, reminiscent of places maybe you'd want to go on vacation, or, you know, places you see in like National Geographic.
Sure.
But now VR can bring that to you in real life. But now when we started the second, to your initial question, when we started the second game, it's like, how do we get you out of the castle? Because we don't want a VR experience for an entire game that you're just stuck in these small rooms, or like, and it's cathedrals like scale buildings and interiors, so they are larger than life. But we do want to make sure that we are utilizing VR. Like the whole point is to take you to fantastical places. And
sure.
If you play it, you'll notice there's some mystical elements to the game, akin to like, I think Mario 64, you jump into these paintings and then you go to all these cool worlds. And we have something similar to that, where we have these realms, and one of them, is like snowy mountain peaks in the, you know, Tibetan mountains. And we throw in some like Aurora Borealis in there just for like good measure, because not, you know, everyone sees photos of that, but we're trying to recreate that feeling of being there. And so I think, you know, the story, I loved where we started off, and I loved where we went, but we did have to find creative solutions to like keep it interesting.
Now, is that why you called the game Book 2 and not just flat out 2, because it was one big story? Did that go into that, or am I just kind of?
We debated the title of the game, and we sent out a survey to the studio, and I think there's a lot of like part 2s and just like name of the game 2, and when I think the fans were really the ones who ultimately chose, because everyone who would write us emails would say, when do we get Book 2? And so, and we took that and we're like, oh my God, that's better than anything we came up with. So we had to like, that was the one we landed on. And we, you know, it's for the fans. If the fans didn't love the first game so much, we probably wouldn't have made the second one. And so it's really about, it's a little bit of like a handshake to them and say, hey, this is for you.
And it seems to have paid off. so far, based on the feedback you were telling me earlier in the conversation. In a similar vein to that story question, I've read that book 2 has more of a definitive ending. It is not quite the cliffhanger that the first game was. So now you find yourself at a crossroads. If you're thinking about if a third game were to ever happen, would that be, if you had to guess right now, or the ideas that you might have, would that be another sequel? Or could you then spin off maybe and follow other characters in the same universe? Do you have ideas going both ways, or where's your head at right now that book 2's out?
Are you sure you haven't played the second game yet?
I am sure.
Because you are touching on some things, like there, I'll put it here, like you start the game in a library and there's books all around you.
Yeah.
You've only picked up one book.
One book. Oh boy.
Yeah, you picked up one book. Well, now two books. But it's following, but there's an infinite amount of books in this library with infinite amount of tales. And I like to think that you pick up a book and it could be a different character. But a different story, but like in the same universe. But I also like to think that you picked up Quill's book on purpose. Okay. Like you were meant to be with Quill, and Quill was meant to meet you. And so take that and
I will take that.
Decipher. But I really, I would love for you to play the game and sort of, because there are some secrets and things that happen in the story that I think will surprise you a little bit.
Yeah. So spoiler alert for anyone listening to the podcast, he just said both. No, I'm kidding. He did not say
that.
He did not say that. So let's talk about porting the game from PSVR to Quest. You've done that with both Moss games so far. Obviously the biggest difference right off the top of my head is the controller. You have the PS4 DualShock or whatever it is controller you're using on PSVR. The Quest has its own handheld controllers. Other than that, and any control factors that may have arisen, what was the biggest challenge in that porting process? What to you was it processing power and technical things like that, or was there some sort of fundamental change that people might not think about?
Yeah, I think both Doug and I the art team and the design team and engineering team, we all had our own things to figure out for this. Okay. And we put a lot more detail into the second game for the PSVR. And so I would say even the jump to making it work for an Android machine was quite significant. And we spent the 4 months that it took to create it from the art team, just optimizing and making sure that everything that you experienced on the PSVR felt the same for the Quest 2. And so it might not mean, like, we did have to cut down on a lot of geometry costs. Hopefully when you play it, you don't feel that change, because we worked really hard to try to keep the same fidelity. And so we didn't add a bunch of new elements. We ended up having to take some things out. But, there's a lot of tricks you can use in the skybox where you can look up and, like, you see a castle and you can fake it to basically create, it will look like there is a castle in front of you, but it's in reality, it's more of a flat images, and you use a bunch of tricks to trick the mind. Okay. And things like, like we had to remove all of our lights. We had to create a bunch of decals for all the ledge hangs, and just a lot of, like, not so fun stuff to do, but as far as, like, it being rewarding, I think it's gonna be up there with the best looking games for the Quest 2. Cool. For sure.
And Doug, from a design standpoint?
Yeah, I think design, we always kind of knew that we were gonna eventually port it to Quest 2. So we had it in the back of our mind of like things we want to do when the user has both hands free independently. Sure. So there was sometimes we had to make some changes just to handle the PSVR's constraints of, like, one-handed. You can't really move your hands too far away from the camera, or you can't block the camera. So those are some worries we had. But then with the Quest, we were kind of open that up. There's a few little tweaks we made in a few levels. Now that you can kind of reach anywhere you want, any kind of angle, we could let you be a little more free in a few of the powers you get. But for the most part, it was sort of some of the puzzles we needed to kind of double check, like if you grab this puzzle object with both hands, or your left hand, then your right hand, you just need to handle that situation. Okay. You're kind of assuming you're grabbing with only one hand a lot of times. So there's things like that. It was just some assumptions we made that, okay, now we got to consider, what do we want to happen if you use both hands in certain situations. The only real changes it made was some little faster pacing. So now in combat, you can grab 2 enemies at once, or you can like grab an enemy and charge roll with your other hand. So those are things that we kind of expected, and we're like, yeah, feel free to do it if you kind of want to give yourself that extra power in combat. So a lot of things that we just considered, and we just had to kind of make sure we handled once we got to Quest 2.
Things I would have never even thought of. One hand with the controller versus 2 hands. I just said it and I still didn't think of something like that. And similarly, from a design standpoint, Chris talked about things they had to be taken away, but were there any conceptualizations of things that might have been more possible thanks to the wireless aspect of Quest 2, maybe in the exploration or in movement? Because when you don't have wires attached to you and you can move in a full 360, I feel like there's more that can be achieved in that regard. Anything that you tried to do there that maybe didn't work out or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. You know, with the quest tracking, you know, you're much more free to kind of go anywhere you want in the level, move your hands anywhere you want. Whereas PSVR, we had to make sure we kept things very constrained to where things wouldn't get weird if you left the kind of expected zone.
Yep.
So that was one thing the reviews hit was sometimes the hand tracking would get a little jittery if you were not paying attention, or if you turned your chair too far and you weren't facing the camera anymore. So now, without having that worry, we can kind of just free the player to kind of just have a good time. So in general, everything is just a little smoother.
Cool.
So your head can you can put your head anywhere you want. You can put it into some of the nooks and crannies that we've hidden some secrets in, some little Easter eggs here and there. And so really, it's just knowing that players are now kind of free to move about the cabin.
Yes, that's really one of my favorite things of the first Moss game. The fact that I could just like look down, like I'm looking down the street and I can see all the things that are coming at me or behind me. That's really cool. So it sounds like it's a lot of give and take with PSVR and Quest and that transition. There are things that have to be taken, things that have been added, but they both stand together as ports. Absolutely. So whoever's using it is playing it. That's awesome. Glad to hear that. So let me get you out of here with this last question. We are coming up on time. I would be remiss if I didn't try to ask this before you all left. I have to ask you about PSVR 2. I know, I have to. So some dev kits have been spotted out in the wild. I'm not going to ask you if you have one. I'm not going to do that because I know you can't answer that question. Big Jim Ryan would come after you. I will ask, however, if anyone on the team or if the team has been able to experience it in any capacity. Have you at Polyarc been able to try it, whether in your studio or elsewhere? And have you been noodling any concepts as far as the jump for your next game, I assume would be on a new VR platform, and what you might be able to do?
Yeah, I have experienced it out of office. I got to play the Horizon.
Cool.
Some of the Horizon experience, and I got to say it was gorgeous. And it made me just think of like all the and I think the world that of Horizon is, I think, comparable as far as like, you know, they're all about lush environments. There's definitely a futuristic tech aspect to it, but the feeling of that they want you to have a lot of the time, I think it's kind of a mirror of what we're also trying to do. Like the emotional journey of the character is pretty similar to that of Quill's.
A word I would use there is majesty. I feel like both of those universes definitely have a lot of majestic elements to them. Sure.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure. One of the features that I'm really excited about, and I think a lot of VR enthusiasts are excited about, is the foveated rendering.
Mm-hmm.
Basically rendering, and you know, one, there's a design aspect to that I'll let Doug talk to, but the visual fidelity that you can get when you're only truly rendering in high def the thing that you're specifically looking at, is going to be so powerful, and I think it's going to blow people's minds, especially those who, you know, our television screens, we need to render everything.
Yep.
You know, maybe there's a version that, you know, you can see where you're looking at, but if two people are watching the same screen, what are you rendering then? And
that's true.
And I feel like the level of fidelity that we're going to get is going to be pretty unreal. Again, I don't think that was turned on when I got to play the demo.
Sure.
That said, it was still a gorgeous experience.
That's cool. And Doug, from a design standpoint, have you got to see it too?
Well, I didn't get to play that one, but I know they have the eye tracking tech, and so that's one we're excited about, because we already use some some kind of gaze targeting to kind of make assumptions about what the player is looking at. Like if you're looking at Quill, or you're looking at the puzzle piece that they want you to be concentrated on. But with the eye tracking, we can tell we're looking at a little more accurate. So which part of the puzzle are you looking at? Even like which part of Quill you're looking at. You're looking to her eyes, or you're looking at her ear, or the weapon. Cool. So now we can kind of just play with that more. Right now, Quill will kind of respond if you're looking at her or looking at something in the room. But now that we know what exactly you're looking at, then we can kind of say, okay, you're looking at a part of the puzzle, but maybe not the correct part, or you're looking at Quill right in the eye. So now she can like more directly respond to that even quicker. So that'll be a fun one to play with. And it really adds to what we're already doing. And so it's a great tech that's kind of just slot right into what we're thinking.
Just the fact that the gears are turning is a beautiful thing. I love
always turning.
Well, that is it for this interview. I will let you guys go. I believe you have a couple more to get to. I'm sure you're very tired, but I appreciate you coming to speak with me for a little bit. Chris Alderson, co-founder and art director of Polyarc, Doug Burton, senior game designer at Polyarc, Moss Book 2 on Quest 2 right now on PSVR right now. Go check it out. Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It's nice meeting you, Jason. Have a good one.
Meeting you too.
Yeah.
Coming up after the break, we'll talk about the Midseason Madness of the Overwatch League and how your Fusion are faring as they play. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Cheese Steaks and Controllers, presented by Fox PHL the Gambler. My esteemed thanks to Chris Alderson, and Doug Burton from Polyarc coming on to talk about Moss Book 2. If you have a VR, if you have the Quest 2, or if you have a PSVR and you have not played Moss either chapter, you really should. It's a fantastic game, one of the best VR games I have ever played, and it is one that you should check out. So thank you to Chris Alderson and Doug Burton from Polyarc for coming on to the show today. But we must now move on to the Overwatch League. Yes, we are going to talk about the Midseason Madness right here. And man, oh man, what a absolutely nuts turn of events that I get to talk about now. So I purposely waited to record this segment until after the Fusion's game on Thursday night. I specifically waited because I knew they were playing at 8:30. I knew I had something to do between 8:30 and 9:30, so I figured I'll wait until the Fusion play, and then I get immediate reactions to that match. First, though, I'm going to go through where they have gone so far. So, the Midseason Madness, if you remember from last week, I mentioned that the play-ins, winners round 1, was on Monday, the 18th. Fusion's first match would be against the Hangzhou Spark. I thought that was a play-in. I thought it was, if you win this match, you're in. If you lose, you go home. So when we lost to Hangzhou 3-1, I thought that was it. I thought I was going to talk about how we were one and done, and that was another disappointing tournament, and, you know, there was nothing really to get into as far as how they performed. Turns out I was wrong about that. Tuesday, they were just off to go through winners round 2, and then Wednesday night, last night, as I'm recording this on Thursday, they played another match based on it's a double elimination for every team that made it. They did have a second match that I just wasn't aware of, and they faced off against the Dallas Fuel. They won that match. They beat the Dallas Fuel 3-1, which for me was everything that I wanted from the Midseason Madness when it came to the Fusion. I wanted one win, and I got it. They played very well against Dallas in the first 2 maps. I admit that I checked the highlights of the second 2 because it was pushing midnight. But they won 2-1 on the first map. They lost 6-4 on the Kings Row map. And then 1-0. The push map, and then the hybrid map, I believe, on Route 66. They went over the Dallas Fuel. The 4-seed Dallas Fuel falls to your Fusion. A wonderful turn of events. Very, very happy about that. And then tonight. So tonight was a match between 2 surprises, I think, as far as getting this far into the tournament. You had your Fusion, who were ranked 10th, and the Mayhem, who were ranked 11th, making it into the final 8. The winner of this match will go on to face the loser of Hangzhou and Gladiators, which are the next match on the docket as I'm recording this. So they will follow the Fusion, who just ended. This match was an absolute nail-biter. It went as long as it possibly could in a Overwatch League match. So the first map was a control map, Ilios. Florida took that 2-1. Fusion kind of got off to a slow start. But then they came out and absolutely destroyed the Mayhem, obliterated them on Kings Row in the second match. Just an absolute drubbing. There's really no way other way to describe it. Florida had no answer to anything that we did. Zest and MN3, the rookies on damage, were having their way. Fury with a clutch after clutch. Aim God and Fixa just looking great. All five of them looking great. And then in Gibraltar, they kind of fell back a little bit, lost the map 2-1, could not figure out how to get past a stone wall effort that Florida put up going towards the second checkpoint. Just a really, really strong effort by Florida. Their tank player, someone, is very, very good. They actually are one of the few teams that run a 2-tank setup, so they have Checkmate and someone running tanks. At least on this map they did. And the Fusion had no answer for it. So they did drop that map. And then, in what was a fantastic show of grit, I thought, and effort, they went down. They had a little bit of a deficit in the push map on New Queen Street. And then fought and got that robot back to their side to the point where it was nearly impossible for Florida to recover from it, and they were able to take the push map, tie it at 2, and go to a second control map tiebreaker in Lijiang Tower, which for me is a map that every time I watch the Fusion, I feel like they have trouble on that map. They have a little bit of a long history with losses on this map, as far, like, at least in my watching. So I was a little worried about it. I was also a little worried when they dropped the first map, or the first game of the 3, the best of 3 series on control maps. And then in the second one, Florida was able to get the point to 99%, but Fusion fought back. They were able to get the win and move it to that third map, because you obviously, as the shoutcaster said, Fusion have to take it all the way. So we got to the last map of the last game, and somehow, some way, your Philadelphia Fusion were able to come out victorious, and now await the loser, as I said, of Hangzhou and LA Gladiators. Not sure who that is, won't know who it is as of recording, just because I'm recording this and then I'm going to, put everything together and head up. But your Fusion have 2 big wins in the Midseason Madness. I think this team is, I hesitate to say this because they are so back and forth at times, but I think this team is starting to get its feet under it. I think the rookies are starting to have a little more confidence. I think they're starting to make smarter plays. There were a couple of plays by Zest playing Tracer where he would get a stick or he would have some sort of amazing elimination that were just some of the most mind-bending things I've ever seen. Bellis Rhea, the tank, still performing at a very high level. Love the way he uses Wrecking Ball. It's just wonderful, right? It's wonderful to see that this team is starting to get some big wins underneath it, get some confidence back. Now, the road is still very rocky between now and the grand finals on Sunday. On Saturday night. If they were to continue in this tournament, they now have to have 2 straight days of 2 straight games. So if they win tomorrow's match, Friday's match, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, they then play again at 11:30 Eastern Time in the late game. So they play the first one and the last one if they want to continue. And then if they win that one, they play again at 7 p.m. on Saturday night. And if they win that, they go straight into the grand finals against the team from the winners bracket who hadn't played since 10 p.m. the night before in the in the finals. So coming out of the losers bracket, the main deficit may not be a point to the winner's side in the standings, but it is a major rest issue where, like, put it this way, the teams that are left to play the winners match, right? So there's two teams. Shanghai plays San Francisco, and Hangzhou play LA Gladiators. Tomorrow's schedule is 3 losers matches, 1 winners match, right? And then Saturday is 1 losers and then grand final. So whoever wins between Shanghai and San Francisco will move on to play the winner of Hangzhou Gladiators. That match is Friday night at 10 p.m. Whoever wins that doesn't play again until grand finals. That's quite the rest advantage. Almost 24 hours, whereas the team coming from the loser's side would have to play 4 matches in 2 days, which is the normal schedule for the qualifiers for these tournaments. But that's still a very tall order to ask of any team, let alone the teams playing at the highest level of this tournament. I am concerned. I don't know if this is going to be I don't know if this is going to be the end of the road, or if this is going to be some sort of miracle run that this team goes on. I worry that the amount of matches being asked of them, especially if they are as intense as the Florida one was tonight, you would think as the teams get better, the matches get harder, that they just may run out of gas, you know what I mean, from a lack of experience. They just might have to sit and, take a loss here and move it, take that learning to later in the year. But it is exciting to see them winning, and it's exciting to see them winning in a gritty fashion, in a knockdown, drag out, every kill counts sort of way. Do I think they have another win in them? No. I do think that this will be the end of the road tomorrow, no matter who they play, because both of these teams are absolutely amazing. But having said that, I also think that I was wrong before. I said that they would only get 1 win in this tournament. They've gotten 2. The kickoff clash about a month or so ago, I didn't think they'd get a single win. They got to the grand finals. The team is continuing to surprise me. So maybe they can make a deep run. Maybe they can be a Cinderella story. I don't know. But what I do know is they're impressing me now, and I'm hoping they take these lessons and apply them to the rest of the year. So as I mentioned, the winners matches that are happening as I speak, as I record this right now, Hangzhou and LA Gladiators, and then Shanghai versus San Francisco later on. Fusion are still in, obviously. The other side of the losers bracket is the Atlanta Reign, who beat Houston 3 matches to 1 for their place in the final 6. So that is an even split, believe it or not, of 3 Western teams, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Atlanta, and 3 Eastern teams, Shanghai, Hangzhou, and Philadelphia. When only 4 teams from the Eastern side qualified, that's pretty impressive, and it kind of shows the strength of the Eastern region as opposed to the Western region. Not to say that the Western region is bad. It is not. But the Eastern region is kind of showing their mettle here in that almost half of the teams in it remain in this tournament halfway through, going into the 5th day of competition, as opposed to only 3 of 8 qualifiers being left from the Western side. The lone loss for the Eastern region, the lone team that has been knocked out so far, shockingly, is the Seoul Dynasty, who were blanked 3-0 by Hangzhou, and then lost 3-2 in what for me would be one of the biggest upsets of the entire tournament, losing 3-2 to Atlanta, who, like I said, now sits waiting for their opponent, the loser of Shanghai and San Francisco. Good luck with that. So, I'm excited about the Fusion. I'm excited about their prospects. I'm excited about their victories. I'm excited about them getting these tough wins. It will only bode well for them in the future, considering that how many of them are rookies, and they can start to build a core, a strong chemistry going into what will be the latter half of the year. But I do say that I would not be surprised if their Midseason Madness tournament lives end at 7 o'clock Friday night. I'd like to be wrong. I would like to be wrong about that. Part of me is saying this so that they can prove me wrong. But I think the road's going to end against LA or Hangzhou, depending on who is bumped to the lower bracket. Coming up after the break, we'll talk about San Diego Comic-Con, which kicked off earlier this week, and talk about things that you should be looking forward to as a video game fan, because believe it or not, video games have a decent presence at San Diego Comic-Con, and we'll have more on that after we come back. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode number 105. Wrapping things up today with a preview of San Diego Comic-Con. San Diego Comic-Con 2022, SDCC is back at the San Diego Convention Center after 2 years of digital attempts and cancellations and other pandemic-related nonsense. But we are back in full force. There's going to be a ton of news throughout the weekend across movies and television. Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings will be there. Marvel and DC will obviously be there with movies and TV shows and stuff like that. But I wanted to focus a little bit on the video game offerings at SDCC. If you're a gamer and not so much in the movie or TV realm, what is something you should be looking forward to when the weekend comes up? And it already started, actually. It started Thursday with a couple of announcements. Dragon Ball The Breakers, which is Bandai Namco's attempt at Dead by Daylight, 7 survivors versus 1 big bad in a multiplayer match. That comes out October 14th. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection, which has 13 different Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games in one collection, was revealed for August the 30th, so that will be soon coming out as well. But there's plenty of things to take in and plenty of things to look at when it comes to San Diego Comic-Con. The first being on Thursday, so I'm recording this on Wednesday night, this particular segment on Wednesday night. The episode's still going up on Friday, so I don't know what happened at this panel yet. But in case you're listening to this on Friday and you're like, ooh, I didn't know that was happening, let me go check and see what was announced. Gotham Knights by Warner Brothers Montreal, the return to the Batman action genre, will be, it sounds like they're going to be showing off Batgirl and what she can do in this game leading up to its October 25th launch. I know they did Robin, a profile on Robin already. I don't think they've profiled Red Hood yet. But Batgirl is next. At least it seems like that based on the teases that are all over the Gotham Knights Twitter and stuff like that. So that's Thursday night. There was also staying with Warner Brothers. There's a panel that I am specifically looking forward to on Friday at 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 10:15 a.m. Pacific. And that is a panel all about multiverses, the open beta starting up this week in early access for folks who are interested in that game. I have been playing it a little bit. I've streamed it a couple of times on Tuesday when it came out. I'm going to try and stream again at times when I can throughout the weekend. But they will have a full-on panel with behind the scenes and a couple of other things. Looks like they're going to be perhaps showing off some new stuff as well. The tweet says, we're on our way to San Diego. You don't want to miss our panel this Friday at 10:15 a.m. Pacific time. We may or may not have some things to show you. The panel will be helmed by Tony Huynh, who is the co-founder of the studio making the game and the director of Multiverses. Shelaman Bird, who is the executive producer of external development at Warner Brothers, who is focused on multiverses, and 2 of the voices from the game, Matthew Lillard, who is obviously the voice of Shaggy, and Tara Strong, who is the voice of Harley Quinn in the game. But if you don't know the name Tara Strong and you've been watching movies and cartoons as long as I have, she is ever present. You could probably think of 5 different shows that you watched as a kid and she was a voice on one of them. She is, she's awesome. So that panel will be good for not only new Multiverses news, but just to hear about, the people who are voicing the game and to get that perspective too. Always a good time. Konami also, I mentioned the Cowabunga collection earlier. Konami is hosting a panel on that at 3:15 p.m. on July 22nd, so Friday, for an hour, that will go through the history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. It will have Kevin Eastman, who is one of the artists on the game, giving out original prints. So if you're out there at San Diego Comic-Con listening to this, first, thank you. I don't know how you found me, but that's really, really cool. But secondly, go check out this panel with Eastman, Charles Murakami, and Chris Collar, who will be talking about the Ninja Turtles games and discuss items from the past, present, and maybe even the future. But make sure you keep an eye on that Cowabunga collection as well if you liked the Ninja Turtles games when you were younger, because that thing is stacked to the gills with Ninja Turtle greatness. Again, 13 games. Some of them are repeats, but it's versions from different consoles. So like Tournament Fighters, the Street Fighter style Ninja Turtles game from the early mid-90s, is the original. It's a Nintendo version, it's the Super Nintendo version, and the Sega Genesis version all in one spot. That's pretty cool. But as far as companies that have booths on the floor, so things maybe you can try and find some information or some pictures about the booths on the floor. Bandai Namco is there, highlighting Dragon Ball The Breakers, as I mentioned earlier. Square Enix will be there with a lot of their Play Arts and Plus Arts figurines. They actually created a bit of a stir yesterday by announcing that the one pre-orderable statue of Cloud from Final Fantasy VII will come with a digital version with its own unique certificate of authenticity. Basically saying we're bringing NFTs to San Diego Comic-Con without actually saying they're bringing NFTs to San Diego Comic-Con. Those rascals. Yeah, that did not go well, especially for a game that centers around the health of the planet. Introducing NFTs, not the smartest decision they ever had. So, also, if you're a Street Fighter fan looking for more footage of Street Fighter 6, San Diego Comic-Con does have a Capcom booth, a rather impressive one at that. If you go to the Street Fighter Twitter, some really, really cool pictures with demos of Street Fighter 6. So players who are at the convention who want to check out that demo for the first time, it is there for them to do. I personally am very much looking forward to that match footage. I love when more people get their hands on the game and they're able to experiment more and try out some new things, especially in Southern California, SoCal being a huge fighting game community area. So there's probably a lot of players chomping at the bit to get in on that. So I would definitely be scouring YouTube for footage and things like that as that game comes out. Blizzard Entertainment will be there. I already said Square Enix. It's a huge, always huge. People don't really associate San Diego Comic-Con with video games. It's because obviously Marvel and DC dominate with TV and movies, and then other companies get in on the action as well. Definitely not a video game convention, but that does not mean that the medium is not properly what's the word I'm looking for? Properly represented on the show floor. Case in point, Star Trek Resurgence was announced at the Game Awards this year. It is a Telltale, it's not Telltale, it's Dramatic Labs, who used to be Telltale developers. They are hosting a panel about the game, hosted by friend of the show and guest on episode 25, Andrea Renee. She'll be moderating this panel. Features the lead writer on the game, three other writers on the game, and then an executive producer for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, talking about the experience of Star Trek Resurgence. It's called Noological Choices, Star Trek Resurgence Interactive Experience. If you're a Star Trek fan and you're interested in this game, this is 7:30 to 8:30 on Friday Eastern Time. 4:30 to 5:30 Pacific Time. So again, if you're listening to this while you're out there and you want to check out this panel, you can do that, and you will be one of the first to explore Star Trek Resurgence, a new third-person choice-driven adventure game set within the iconic sci-fi universe, launching later this year, apparently, for multiple consoles. My only big beef, honestly, with San Diego Comic-Con as a video game convention is that we get all these cool panels, you hear all these cool things, people are, talking about everything that they saw, but they're not streamed. Like in this day and age, you'd think all of these things were streamed and broadcast to the masses. Some people have streams, some companies. Others, for whatever reason, don't want people outside the convention to see their stuff. I get it. You want to keep some things exclusive to the people in the room. I understand that. It would be very hypocritical of me to say that everything that's available at the convention should be available at home as well, when I am a big proponent of E3 coming back, and E3 won't do that outside of the big press conferences like Microsoft and all those. But with things like this, with smaller, panel experiences, especially for games which aren't really, again, the biggest focus of a San Diego Comic-Con, I really would like some of these panels to be broadcast, just so I can get a feeling of what's going on. Like, I'd love to see the Star Trek Resurgence panel. I'd love to see the Multiverses panel, as I mentioned earlier. But a lot of these companies don't stream their San Diego Comic-Con panels, leaving us to wonder, what's being announced. We'll just have to follow Twitter feeds for people in the room and see what's going on. And that kind of stinks, right? I mean, obviously, if I could get out to San Diego, I would. I'd be walking that floor upside down and backwards, but I couldn't do that this year. Just wasn't in the cards. So I have to live vicariously by refreshing my Twitter feed, and hopefully somebody gives me the information that I want. But that's not to say that there's not a ton of news to look out for. Hopefully some of the big stuff will be streamed and you'll be able to watch it. But regardless, look for coverage all over the internet of San Diego Comic-Con. GameSpot.com, obviously, will have some stuff, potentially even from me. But, the big websites will have everything. Twitter will be going crazy, I'm sure, with the big announcements. I honestly do expect to hear, to get off of video games for a second, like the Marvel Studios, maybe Phase 5 or Phase something. There's a Marvel, I think, has the most pressure on it going into this, because the people are starting to wane on it. Its popularity seems to be taking a bit of a hit. So I am curious to see how they deal with that, though I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be, a bad thing. I think they're going to come out and really knock it out of the park. So, San Diego Comic-Con this weekend. Keep an eye on Twitter for gaming news and all the other nerd-type news that I thrive in. It's good to see San Diego Comic-Con back. One tiny step closer to normalcy after what has been multiple years of very much everything but that. And I would also like to say that if you are listening to this and you are going out there, please, please, please be careful. Mask up. Do what you have to do. There will be over 100,000 people in that convention center. It is a breeding ground for what I understand to be a very uncomfortable variant at the moment. I know about 10 people around me right now have it. Some of them are moderately uncomfortable. Some of them a little more so. But just keep your wits about you. Be safe. If you're not feeling well, don't go. Don't put other people at risk. And just have a good time. San Diego Comic-Con is back. It's going to be a great weekend. And I hope that this is just the first big return of many big returns to come in the world of geek conventions. Looking at you, PAX Prime, and all the other big conventions that are still to come. And with that, that is the end of Cheesesteaks and Controllers, episode number 105, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. A major special thanks to Chris Alderson and Doug Burton of Polyarc for stopping by to talk about Moss Book 2, now available on Meta Quest 2, and has been available on PSVR for PS4 for quite some time. Very much looking forward to seeing how that goes and where the future of that franchise holds. Chris seems to think that it might not be with Moss. Chris makes me think that it might not be specifically with the story of that we've been told so far. It might start to branch out and go away from Quill. But for now, I love the conversation we had. Very, very appreciative of them both. And I look forward to whatever Polyarc has up their sleeve next. But until next time, episode 106 next week, we'll come back with more. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you have an even better week right behind it. And we will be back next week with all of the biggest gaming and esports news directly to you here on Cheesesteak and Controllers. Goodbye.